Hello, David Clarke here from DVC Training, and today I'm going to go through capturing using a Blackmagic device. I'm going to do a couple of videos on this. So the first one is going to be about capturing inside of EDIUS and how you would set that up. And then after that, I'll look at capturing through Resolve and also through Blackmagic's own program. If you're using EDIUS, you're bound to use EDIUS to do all the capturing. If you're using Premiere or Resolve, then you'll end up having to use either Media Express or Resolve to do the capturing, because Premiere doesn't let you capture anymore at all, not from anything. Anyway, looking at EDIUS first. So what I'm going to look at now is how to set up a Blackmagic Capture device inside of EDIUS. In EDIUS 11, you can't capture through DV or HDV, but you can if you put in a Blackmagic device. So I'm going to show you how to set that up and capture inside of EDIUS. It's pretty simple to do, really. In fact, the biggest problem I had with setting all this up was finding an old-fashioned camera that worked. Got the camera plugged in. Obviously, I've got a capture heading, and you come up to here and there's nothing set up for capture at all. If I go to select input device, for example, I've got a voiceover device and nothing else. So the first thing I've got to do is tell EDIUS what it's capturing from. So go to the settings and then system settings, then hardware, and you're after this thing, device preset. Obviously in the hardware here, you've got this preview device thing, which is all about using output. And you can see here, I've got a Decklink 4K Extreme, which I've got in this system. You might have something like an Intensity Pro. Setting up Capture with Blackmagic is the same for everything they've got. They use the same drivers for all their different devices. They still work on really old things. So I've got a really old-fashioned Intensity Pros. I've got an Intensity Shuttle. They actually still work using the current drivers. And you can see this one, I've got this 4K Extreme. This is for output under preview device, but for capture, you go to device preset. And I've got to set up a new one. So I'm going to go new, give it a name. So I'm going to set up a standard definition 4:3 preset. To be honest, if you're going to be capturing analog, it's probably going to be standard definition, because if you're using a high definition or 4K camera, it's going to go onto cards or a hard drive or something, and then you'll copy it over from there. So you wouldn't use this for anything other than old-fashioned analog. So although you could set up high definition ones, you're very unlikely to use them. I've given it a name. The next thing you can do is select an icon. You can see it says DV there, which is pointless because it isn't. So I'm going to go here and I could select a different icon, or I could just completely ignore it. So yeah, I'll just go for this sort of tape deck thing. I can even load my own icons up, which are Photoshop files. And I don't bother, because all it does is put a little icon in there, which will turn up in the capture heading. That is kind of irrelevant, really. Mainly give it a name. Go next, and then here is the most important stuff. So where is it coming from? If I click on this list of stuff, you can see I've got Direct Show, Decklink 4K, and Not Select. So obviously I'm going to go for Decklink. You can use Direct Show to capture off various things. Now looking at this, if I select that, your next thing is what's it coming from, and you can see these are the different things I can actually capture from Direct Show. None of which are useful, but you could actually use that for some devices. Never do. I only ever use Direct Show for setting up a microphone. I'm going to go to Decklink. Then the input grays out because obviously it's coming from the Decklink. And the next question you might say is, okay, where do I tell it whether it's S-Video or Composite or Component? It's not in EDIUS at all. You actually have to dig up a Blackmagic program to do that. So as we're talking about inputs, let me pop down to the Start menu. Go to Apps, Blackmagic, and it's this thing you're looking for, Blackmagic Desktop Video Setup. This we will come back to a bit, but mainly for capture, what you've got to do in here is tell it how it's coming in. So it pops up there, tells you what your gizmo is, and then you click on this little, I suppose it's a menu in a round circle, and it gets you to the settings. You've got stuff for output, input, audio, and so on. I'll go through all this a bit later on. But here, really, I just want to go to input. Here I tell it how my camera is plugged in. I'm using an old-fashioned Hi8 camera. It's plugged in through Composite, so I've got to tick that. And then click Save, and then it should see it. I haven't got anything here to confirm it's seeing it, but if I click on Settings, it will pop up here, and you should see a picture if it's working. So obviously it isn't, and I've got to do something to change that. What I've got to change is this video format. So this says what hole is it coming through, which I set through the Blackmagic program. This says what I'm expecting to see through that hole. And I've got loads of options with this particular gizmo all the way up to 4K. Now you notice there's some 8-bit settings and there's some 10-bit settings. So looking at this, I could choose 10-bit 720x576 or 8-bit 720x576. I'm going to choose 10-bit because why not? Truth is, I'm going to be feeding this with a live stream, so it's going to be just a picture of me talking to you, but normally I'd be popping in a tape and playing it, and Hi8, VHS, all that kind of thing, they're all pretty ropey in the first place compared to what we're used to these days. So I'm not really going to notice much difference between 8-bit and 10-bit, but I'll do 10-bit anyway. And obviously 10-bit's the amount of colour. If you've looked at any tutorials on colour grading, you'll know that 10-bit has more colour information in it. You probably wouldn't even notice if you choose 8-bit, but I'll choose 10-bit anyway. And you'll notice that I've got one for 4:3 and one for 16:9. Now most of my standard def is going to be 4:3, but I might set up a 16:9 one if I want to capture some standard def 16:9. Now having done that, if I pop back to settings, oh, I can see a picture. Hello. Yep, that is a really naff, badly lit up picture, so I'm going to get out of that screen before you can carry on looking at it. But yeah, that's confirmed to me I'm getting an image. I'm getting it because I set that, and because in the Blackmagic program, I told it how I was coming in. Now, if I told it, for example, I'm coming in through S-Video, bosh, save it, come back, look at the settings. Oh, I'm in black and white. Yep. If you've got the wrong setting, it might come up in black and white, or it might not come up at all. Let me pop back into the Blackmagic desktop video and say component. Oh, I've still got a picture. Sometimes I don't. But black and white. More often than not, if you've got a problem with the capture and it's black and white, it's because you've just selected the wrong input here. Come and select the right input. Could also be you've got the cables plugged in incorrectly. There's 3 phono plugs on most Blackmagic gizmos. There's a Y, a B and an R input. Well, Y, which is generally green on Blackmagic devices, Y is composite. S-Video is Y and B, and then you stick a little adapter on it, and that becomes an S-Video socket. You've got to make sure you get those the right way around. And component is Y, R and B. Obviously 3 things. That's the whole point about component. It splits the colour up into 3 bits. The holes are actually colour-coded for a component signal. So that's why when it's composite, you use the green one rather than a yellow one. If you're taking a composite out of the back of the deck, it's probably yellow for composite video. Blackmagic, you plug that into the green one, but it's green because that's the right colour for component. If you've got component, use it. It's just a lot of S-Video, VHS decks and things don't. If you've got S-Video, use that in preference to composite. My Decklink 4K Extreme is designed for professionals, so it actually has 3 connections on it, all using BNC connectors. I put adapters on the BNC connectors, and I can convert 2 of those BNCs into an S-Video using the adapter which Blackmagic supply, although they don't happen to supply it with a 4K Extreme, but they do supply it with things like an Intensity Pro. Use component first, S-Video next, composite last. Composite's the worst one. What about HDMI? Well, you might be able to capture standard definition HDMI. It sometimes works with me, but HDMI is high definition media interface, so it's meant for high definition. So a lot of time HDMI plain just doesn't work for standard def, it only works for high def. I have used it to record the output from, say, a computer screen. Not using it right now for these tutorials. I use a thing called OBS, which is a lot easier, but you can actually pipe in a camera through HDMI or SDI if you've got it. Probably won't work for standard def, which is why I've got it set up for composite. As for the rest of this, well, you might need to come to audio and tell it where the sound's coming through. Now, if you have an Intensity Pro 4K, which is the most common card, you won't have the option of different holes. Here, I've got XLRs connected, which actually connected to some adapters, which then go to phonos, which then go to my Hi8 camera. You might not have anything in there, but really those are the only 2 things you set, the input for the picture and the input for the sound. The rest of it, don't bother about. The rest of it is to do with other things, and like I say, I'll explain some of those later. Anyway, now I've got that set up, got picture working, click OK, go on to the next bit. So the next question is, what are you going to capture it into? And you've got uncompressed, Grass Valley, and these MPEG things. Uncompressed is the best quality you're going to get. Probably overkill for standard definition if it's coming off of Hi8 or VHS, because obviously standard definition is not very good compared to what we're used to these days. So uncompressed, probably overkill for that. I would want to use one of these 2. And it's either 8-bit or 10-bit. And since I selected 10-bit there, let's select 10-bit here. These MPEG ones, to be honest, I never use. Have tested them out occasionally, but I would always go for Grass Valley HQX. Once you've selected that, you've got some settings. So you can choose the compression settings. Again, if you're used to making Grass Valley files, you know what these is. I tend to go for fine or super fine. If you go for super fine, it'll make the biggest files. Yeah, selected standard, which normally works pretty well. Again, it's not that great in the first place, but I would tend to go for something like that. Then, what kind of file are you going to make? AVI or MXF? I always do AVI files. Pretty standard, been using those for years, never had the need for MXF. It is useful if you're in a network environment, if you're using the Stratus, things like that. Yeah, you might use MXFs. There are nice things about them. But actually, for most of the things that people will be doing on just single machines, go for AVIs. Do you want to capture high res and proxy? I always go for high res, especially if it's standard def. I don't ever think I'm going to need a proxy file for standard def stuff. Obviously, proxy files meant to make a low res version of it, so it's easy for you to edit. And this is going to be standard def, so can't be that hard. And then audio format. How many channels have you got going in? So I could capture 16 channel audio. I've actually only got 2 going in, so I'm going to set that to 2. If I was coming through HDMI, I have been able to capture surround sound by setting this to 6 channels or 8 channels. I'm only doing stereo off this camera, so 2 will do. And do I want to convert whatever's coming in to 2 channels? So if I chose 8 input channels, this would squeeze it down to 2. Again, I never set that. I always just choose that and leave it. And I reckon if I'm choosing to capture 8 channels, well, I'll take the 8 channels and decide what to do with it later. I don't have to do it here. So in effect, all I've done is choose the deck link, choose the size, choose Grass Valley, and I put that to 2 channels. I'm going to go next. Gives me a quick summary. You used to get an output tab here, if you remember that from previous versions, which isn't there anymore. The output tab I only ever used for recording back to tape and using it for DV, so I never used it for Blackmagic anyway, which is one of the reasons it's been dumped. And there we are, I now have a Blackmagic 4x3 preset. If I wanted to make up another one which was 16:9, I could just right click on it and say copy, and it gives me a new one, and I can call that, double click on it, go next, choose 16:9, everything else is the same. I've now got a 16:9 one. If you capture 16:9 stuff with the 4x3 preset, it's actually very easy to change it afterwards to tell it is 16:9. So it's not that important, but I like to put a couple of those in. I can also put other ones in. So let me copy that one, and I'm going to call this, and again choose a setting here which matches that. So 1920 by 1080 50i. Let's go to the settings, and yep, no picture in there because I'm still only pumping in standard def, but I would if I was pumping in high def. And obviously for high def, you can only come in through either component or HDMI. And now I've got one of those. Now, to be honest, I'm never going to use that. I'm only ever going to use these 2. Because like I said, all high definition at 4K I bring in from cards or whatever, but you can make more up. Having made those up, you can then come up to capture, and still nothing listed here, but I can go to select input device and you can see my input devices. Select that. Okay. Yep, I'm back. I'm behind a microphone. Hello. But I'm back. Final thing I would like to do is actually get them in this list here. So I'm going to go to settings, system settings, go to this thing, right click on it and say assign input preset 1. Right click, assign input preset 2. Assign input preset 3. And now I get them in this list. So I can go to that one. You can notice I can just press F2 to come up with it. So I can click on that, or press F2 now. It'll click on the standard definition one. But there we are. I am now set up and ready to capture. Now, having set those presets up, I don't have to bother to do it again. They're always there. And it is the sort of thing that you can export. So if I go back into the system settings, I can right click on here and export it, and it becomes a file that you can then load up on another computer, or I can select a bunch of them and export them, and it will save those out as one file, which then I can load up onto another computer. So shove it onto the desktop. On another computer I could go import, find that file, open it, and it would load those presets up. Now the next thing I want to do is actually do some capturing. So I'm going to put this into a single mode because it'll be easier to see. And it's pretty simple. You don't get device control. If you're used to DV or HDV capture, you could actually start and stop the deck using here. None of that works. It is very simple. Once you see the picture, you press this button and it starts capturing. As it's capturing, I should be getting a picture coming up on this screen. And if I've got my Blackmagic output going, I should be seeing a picture on the TV, which is connected to the computer. Only downside I do get is that if I've got the thing coming out of the Blackmagic, what I tend to do with my Blackmagic is I'll take the sound of the Blackmagic and loop it back into the computer. Because, you know, when you're using a Blackmagic to watch the timeline, the sound always comes out of the Blackmagic. Trouble is, when you're capturing, that tends to kind of bring up an echo. There'll be sound coming out of the computer because it's capturing, and there'll be sound coming out of the Blackmagic because it's capturing, and they'll be slightly out of sync. So if you end up with the thing looping back in, you suddenly hear an echo. So I do tend to turn off the Blackmagic output whilst I'm capturing and just watch it on here. I mean, actually what I do most of the time is literally press the record button, let it get on with it. Come back and see what it's like at the end of it. But there we are, that's it. It's now captured. I can stop it. I get a clip up here, double click on it and you can look at it, and there is a very unflattering, naff looking image of me talking on a microphone, complete with nonsense stuck over it by the deck. And you can see I've got sound coming through as well. Now when I capture, let's go back and set that going again. Capture. When I capture here, there are a couple of things I can do. First of all, I can be watching it and I can stick in a little marker and a comment. And then when you stop it, have a look at the file, those markers are on the file. You don't have to, but if you're sitting here watching it capture, you could put in little markers in different places to just help you later on. You can do things like give it a duration. So suppose here I typed in, I don't know, 1 minute, start it capturing, it'll now capture for 1 minute. It's always done that. A lot of people didn't know it did it, but it always has done that. It's now going to capture a minute and then stop. So I'll just let it get on with it and then show that it's happened. But that's nice. I can capture for a minute. So sometimes, suppose I am capturing a hi8 tape and I know the tape's 90 minutes. I might type in there like 135, set it going, disappear off and do something else. I know the capture will stop after the tape's run out. I might have a little bit of extra nonsense because obviously analog stuff coming in, the tape finishes, the camera will either go black or just produce a blue screen. Camera makes vary, but it'll produce something at the end of it. Well, it'll carry on capturing that into the computer. If you left it for 3 or 4 hours, it'll capture a couple of hours worth of nonsense. So I might put a duration on it just so that I can get it to stop. Like so. It's captured a minute for me. Other options. When I first go to the capture settings, so I'm just going to press F2, bring up that capture, you'll notice you get this thing up. It's asking you for a tape name. It always ticks this user bit is used as real number, so it would make one up, but I like to take that off and call it something, and then capture it, and then at the end, I'll have a tape name. Of course, you can put tape names afterwards. It's nice to put them in the file in the first place. These options here, obviously I've been pressing F1 to go between them, but you can put little buttons down here as well. So if I go to Settings, User Settings, Interface, Buttons, I'm going to choose the player on the left, and I'm going to put in Input Preset 1, 2, and 3, Apply. Now I've got buttons there to pop up number 1, or pop up number 2, and so on. You'll notice that as soon as I click one, they disappear. That's because I've gone from the player to the capture window. I know it says player up there, but this is now the capture window, which is officially slightly different. There's a whole bunch of other settings as well. So if I go up to Settings and then System, under Application, there's a whole bunch of capture settings. And they're all pretty simple. For a start, this one, Confirm Real Name, that is currently ticked. If I untick it, go to another setting, it now doesn't pop up with that message saying give it a real name. That's what that is. Now for analog stuff, you probably don't need real names. Real names are only really useful if you can batch capture, which you can't. So I tend to untick that for analog stuff. Confirm file name. So at the moment, they're all being called cap something or other. If I do that, I can choose to set the file name either before I capture or afterwards. So if it's set to afterwards, you capture something, you stop it, and it prompts you for a name. There we are. Set to before, obviously pretty simple. It now asks you before you start capturing. Of course, if you've started the deck playing, until I've actually finished naming it and click the OK button, it's not actually capturing, which is why I like to do it afterwards, because I want it to capture as soon as I press the capture button. Obviously load to player after capture, it captures it and puts in the player, pretty obvious. Correct audio areas, I leave that. There's this lot here, all about splitting up footage. So for example, you can get it to split a timecode break when the sampling rate changes, all this kind of thing. Actually, most of that won't have any effect on analog at all. You're not being able to see the timecode. You're literally plugging in a composite cable. You could do that if you had a particular Grass Valley gizmo, but you can't through Blackmagic. My Blackmagic has got an RS-232 port. It could actually control a deck with an RS-232 serial port. Doesn't. So pretty much all those are useless. It can't see the timecode. It can't see the date and time. The audio sampling rate isn't going to change. These are the sort of things that might happen with DV, but most of the time those are irrelevant. And this obviously says, well, if you detect any of these things, what happens? Do you chop it up into a separate file, or do you add a marker or whatever? Since most of these aren't going to work for you, it doesn't really matter. So in here, actually, the only really important thing is the name and whether it prompts you for a tape name. The other thing that you might say is, where is this stuff going? Because I literally click capture, it doesn't actually ask me where it's going. Well, if I actually went to those settings and click the confirm file name before capture, then I could click on it and decide where it's going to go. I can choose a different directory for it and then name it and then capture. If you have it set the other way, so you say after capture, it will go in the project folder. And I always say make sure your projects are stuck at least not on the C drive, on a D drive or something else, and make sure that you've got plenty of space. So I have no problems with it going in the project folder. Of course, if I want to know where it is once I've captured it, I can just right click and go Explorer and it will tell me, and I can pick them up and move them around. So I could move them somewhere else. But generally it goes in the project folder. Apart from that, obviously under capture, you've got capture, which is the general one. You can just do video or you can just do audio. I actually never done those, but you can if you want to. You obviously got your voiceover tool anyway, which is separate to all this stuff. But generally I just click that and capture stuff. Only other thing worth mentioning is, well, what happens if, for example, I choose 16:9 capture and it's 4:3? I mean, I set one up, so if I'm putting in 4:3 or 16:9, I can tell it to be correct. But here I am, I've chosen the wrong one. I'm fatter than normal. I'm all stretched out and widescreen. How do I fix it? Do I have to go back and do it again? Let's load that into the player. Yep, that hasn't worked. Very easy to solve, actually, without having to go and recapture or anything. Just right click on the clip and go to properties and come down to here to aspect ratio. It says it's 16:9. Let me make it 4:3. Sorted. Dead easy. That's why you don't actually need to set up two of these. I did anyway, because it saves me doing it afterwards. But it is dead easy to fix, and it doesn't naff the quality up in any way to change it here. A lot of people, if they've got something where the aspect ratio is wrong on the way in, they'll put it onto the timeline and then they'll use the layouter and they'll try and work out how to stretch this so that, I get the right kind of square. Yeah, you don't have to worry about that at all. The simplest way to change aspect ratio on something's wrong is go to the properties and choose the right one, and it sorts it out every time. Of course, you can have some problems. Actually, most of the problems that I've had recently with capture with people has actually been down to the cameras or the cables, especially if you're using old-fashioned VHS Hi8 decks and cameras. They're getting old, and a lot of them aren't working properly anymore. Here's my collection of cameras, and yep, I've got a problem with this one in that the power supply is a bit duff. This one, the zoom button doesn't work. This one doesn't play stuff properly, and so on. They're all getting a bit ropey, and that's been my biggest problem with capturing. The sort of things you might get are obviously, the first one would be that S-video thing. If I was to click S-video, I'm either in black and white or not seen at all, because I've got the wrong input, so go and set the right input. Composite is the one where you use, if you've got one cable, component is 3 cables, S-video is 2. Not seeing a picture here when you're setting stuff up is generally the inside of the device preset. You haven't set that correctly. You've chosen the wrong thing. If I was to set that to be high definition, I suddenly won't see a picture, or if I was to set it accidentally to NTSC, which is that one, for example. I'm not getting a picture now. So that's typically another one that goes wrong. Plugging cables into the wrong holes. Like I said, the Y input, the green one, is the one that you plug in the yellow phono if you've just got one cable for your video. Obviously the audio, the red and the white, go into the red and white audio in. That's easy. There's always a left and right audio in. It's the video people tend to get wrong, and Y is composite. Y and B together with an adapter is S-video, and Y, R and B is component. If I think I've set up everything right and it's still not working here, sometimes it's down to the fact that the video signal is just a bit ropey. And if it's sort of, you see it flickering there, you see the occasional frame, but then it disappears a lot. Probably the time base, the tape is too naff to actually capture. This particular thing, the Decklink 4K Extreme, doesn't have a time-based corrector built into it. Now, the one I generally get people to buy, which is the Intensity Pro 4K, does. And that does a pretty good job of tidying up naff signals. It's not as good as a standalone time-based corrector. So if you've got a decent standalone thing, you might want to put it through that, and that might clean the signals up enough to see it. And just because a deck can go up onto a television and you can see it, doesn't necessarily mean you can capture it. It might be good enough to pop on a TV, but not good enough for whatever chips are inside the capture gizmo. So sometimes, even though you can see it on a TV, it won't work. If it pops up here, and like I said, it's flashing black sometimes, or the color's not quite right, then yeah, that's very probably a NAS signal. And apart from a time-based corrector, there won't be a lot you can do about it. The other thing is, if I am not getting a picture here, I will come out of EDIUS and I'll pop into another Blackmagic program, which I talk about a bit more in depth in another video. This thing, Blackmagic Media Express. This is Blackmagic's own capture program. And if this doesn't work, there's something wrong either with the signal or with the computer. Sometimes in EDIUS it can be down to some setting you've forgotten, but this one is fairly simple. So you load the thing up, you go to log and capture, then you've got to come up to device and make sure your device is seen and ticked. Then come up to edit and preferences and make sure the input is correct. So here, put it on 720/60p, I'm not getting a picture. Put it on PAL, which is obviously what I'm putting into it. Yeah, I can see a picture. It's in color. Oh, it's working. If it then works in here, then you can go back to EDIUS and see if there's a setting wrong. If it doesn't work in here, that means something else is wrong. Might be that your device is not working properly. Maybe it's not properly installed in the computer, in which case you'll start looking at Device Manager to make sure it pops up there. Obviously, yeah, things should turn up under sound and video controllers. All sorts of other things, obviously, that can then be a problem. But yeah, if you can't get EDIUS working, turn off EDIUS, try this, see if it works. But beyond that, yeah, it's pretty simple. Once it's actually set up to capture, you should just be able to plug stuff in and capture. Right, in the next videos, I'm going to look at capturing through Media Express and capturing through DaVinci Resolve. If you're using EDIUS, I would say capture through EDIUS. The reason you might use those other things to capture is because things like Adobe Premiere don't let you capture at all anymore. So you're going to need to use something else. It's going to be Media Express or it's going to be DaVinci Resolve. But if you've got EDIUS, use EDIUS. Mainly because EDIUS has got Grass Valley HQ as a format, and it's a really good format for capturing. So have a look at those if you want to know more about capturing with Resolve or Media Express. But apart from that, hope you found this video useful. Don't forget to visit the website www.dvctraining.co.uk. And of course, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.